Hey guys, I just wanted to pop in here real quick before we get into all the books I read in March and say a big thank you to Olive for including me in her 10 booktuber recommendations. You have no idea how exciting and how impactful that was for me to see a booktuber that I've been following and admiring for probably close to 5 years recommend my channel. And with that, I want to say a big thank you to everybody who has subscribed recently, and I hope you find something here that you enjoy. Hello everybody, I am back from my surgery, kind of. Obviously we are not in the normal filming space, and that is because I'm just finding it a lot more comfortable to be in bed still, just because of how I can prop up my knee and stuff like that. If you didn't see, I had like a whole surgery update, plus like currently reading, and just some ideas about future content. I did it while putting this face on. So I will link that, and if you are curious about such things, that's where you can find that information. I'm here today to film my March wrap-up. It's going to be a little different in style because I'm trying out some things and also trying to make my life a little bit easier when it comes to editing. We're going to keep this a pretty chill video, so let's go ahead and get started. First off, we're going to start with my March stats. I'm just going to put this in as a screen recording. Instead of taking screenshots and putting in all the photos that I normally would. I just don't have a ton of energy right now, so I'm trying to keep editing as simple as possible. I read 13 books in March for a total of 5,024 pages, which is less than I had been reading in January and February. But given that I was like completely doped up for a week, it does make sense. It looks like my reading was mostly emotional, reflective, mysterious, dark, and adventurous. Yeah, I guess. I guess. I don't know. As far as pacing goes, what's really funny is at 2 weeks into the month, I was like, oh my god, these charts are going to be really boring. And then I shook things up a bit in the last half of the month. So I had 2 that were slow-paced, 10 that were medium paced, and 1 that was fast paced, which is about normal for me. Page count, I had 1 that was under 300 pages, which might be the most impactful book I read this month. But anyway, 10 that were between 300 and 499, and then 2 that were over 500 pages. And then my fiction non-fiction split, I read 10 fiction and 3 non-fiction, which, I mean, I think it's about normal for me. My main genre was historical and then thriller, which I feel like is probably most months for me, although I think sci-fi won last month. Anyway, I had an average rating of 3.69. I gave out 1 1-star, 4 3-stars, 5 4-stars, and 3 5-stars. So let's get into the books, shall we? I don't know how much I'm going to remember from the first half of the month, but I took good notes, and I'm going to try. So the first book I read was The Girls of Brackenhill. Let me see if I can find... There's my notes on it. So I put kind of a synopsis here, which is that Hannah Maloney returns to Brackenhill, which is a castle in the Catskills where she and her sister had spent their summers with their aunt and uncle. She is returning because she's received word that her aunt has died in a car accident. They have been estranged for well over a decade, so it's, you know, kind of odd that she's the one who got the notification because she's the last family that's left. Returning to the home starts bringing back memories of her last summer at Brackenhill when her sister died. It is very psychological and has a lot of family secrets, and I really liked it. I think I gave it 4 stars, and it was a good thriller. One, it has the whole thing where everything's centered on a house, which, I mean, we all know I love. And then family secrets are also a thing that I greatly enjoy. Next, I read How to Behave Badly in Elizabethan England by Ruth Goodman. I cannot talk. This was really interesting, and I remember it being funny too. I learned a lot about like the everyday life in Elizabethan England, because I think typically when I read about that time period, I'm reading about Queen Elizabeth, you know, not like the common everyday experience. Goodman is not shy as an author, and she has experienced a lot of these things because she's kind of experimented with living like they did in Elizabethan England, which I thought was really interesting. She had a really interesting discussion on menstruation, which I enjoyed because I don't think that's talked about openly enough in books. And she talked about how difficult it was to find information on how women handled these things because it was something that's just not talked about. So I liked that section. The only bit I didn't like was she had like an entire part of the book on staff fighting, and I was like, this is really boring. Like, she went into a lot of like the logistics of it, and watching it probably would have been interesting, but reading it, not so much. So that got 4 stars as well. Hi, baby. Ooh. Hi. You want to say hi to the camera, or do you just trying to give kisses? Cause I don't want. Thank you. Oh. Okay. Are you done? You gonna lay down now? You wanna lay down on my lap? Okay. The next book I read was the Book of Longings by Simone. This book was really interesting. I only bought it because it was on the, are you okay, Loki? I only got it because it was on the Goodreads choice for historical fiction, I think. And I'm trying to read through anyway. So I'm just gonna, I wrote like a really nice synopsis, and I think I'm just gonna read it because I read this post-surgery and I feel like it's just gonna be better if I read what I wrote then rather than trying to figure it out now. So I picked up this book not knowing a thing about it, so when I read the first sentence, I am Anna, wife of Jesus, I immediately set it back down and read the synopsis because I needed to know what I was getting myself into. This book ended up being a pleasant surprise. While some would for sure find the content blasphemous, Sue Monk Kidd has reimagined what Jesus' life was like in the decade before his ministry began. This book is 100% Anna's story, though. Between Anna and her Aunt Yaltha, this book strikes a very feminist tone in portraying what it was like to be a woman in a time that women were viewed as property. It shows how they were shut out in nearly every facet of life, and how, even among other women, you weren't likely to find an ally. Anna believes it is her calling in life to give a voice to these women by writing down their stories. You know, it was very touching and heartbreaking to read some of the things, especially I'm not going to call it a rape scene because it is not described in the book. We just know that it happened to this particular character. And when she tried to speak out about it and get some kind of justice for herself, she was the one who was looked down upon, and nothing happened to the man. So it was stories like that that really just struck a chord in me and made me really enjoy this book. The only thing that I didn't like was that like the villainous figures didn't really seem to have any motivation for their villainy. It was just like a personality defect, and maybe I'm just like overthinking it, and that's just my interpretation of it and not the actual intent. But yeah, so that got 4 stars from me. Next up we had Magic Lessons by Alice Hoffman. I gave this 3 stars. If we were going purely on enjoyment, I probably should have rated it lower, but this is a prequel to an existing series, and I feel like if I had read and enjoyed those other books, then I would have enjoyed this one a lot more. So I think, like, the only reason I read it was because this was also in the historical fiction section for the Goodreads Choice Awards, and I think I probably did it a disservice by reading it without having an existing love for the series. Next book I read was Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. I gave this 5 stars without a hesitation at all. I picked this up because Brittany at Literally Smitten and Rosie over at Rosie Cockshed had been raving about it, and I needed to be included in that. So I picked it up, and it evoked so many emotions in me. It made me abhor not even just the institution of slavery, but everybody at every step along the way. Just made me so incredibly angry. If you don't know the basic synopsis of Homegoing, we have 2 half-sisters. They don't know each other. One is married off to a white man who is part of the slave industry, I guess. And then the other one is taken as a slave. And then we follow their descendants. So you only get 1 chapter from each perspective. You get like 1 snippet of everybody's stories from this time in, I think, is it the 1800s or the 1700s? I can't remember, but all the way to like 19-something in the US. And it was heartbreaking. Each and every character has their own distinct, different struggle in life. So you get a lot of issues with racism and mental health, and it runs the gamut. And oh my god, I'm like getting emotional just thinking about it. And then in the end, the way the author brought the story full circle was just beautiful, and I loved it. And I got done reading this, and I thought this was the book that Yaa Gyasi was born to write. And I can't say enough good things about it. It's entirely possible the camera has shifted because I needed to get up. Sorry. I tried to get it back to the positioning it was, but if things look different, that's why. Okay, next I read The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. I previously read The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James, and I really liked it, and then this one sounded even more up my alley, and so I finally picked it up, and I gave it 5 stars. It was phenomenal. I think Simone St. James is quickly becoming like an auto-author for me. It's a thriller that's like dual timelines. We have the timeline of this school, I can't even remember it's like a boarding school, I can't remember what it's called, and the girls who are there. It's basically where people send their troubled daughters, or the daughters they want to hide because they are like bastards or whatever. And so we're kind of following their story there, and then in the present day we're following this journalist, and her sister died on the school property. Like, the school's been closed, but her body was found there at any rate. We're just seeing the various stories of the girls who went to the school, and then the journalist who, her sister died, and like 10 years later she still can't let it go. Like, something about it didn't feel right. Even though the culprit was imprisoned, she just doesn't, something doesn't sit well with her. And Simone St. James is really good at writing like things that feel paranormal, but making you question yourself as to whether or not it actually is paranormal. And I really enjoyed it. Next up, I had The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna. This is the first YA book I've read this year. I knew I wanted to read The Gilded Ones when it came out. 1, because the cover was absolutely gorgeous, and 2, because of the way it discussed purity in regards to women. And I will say that that was done exceptionally well. So I'm just going to read the notes that I took on it while right after I read it, because this is another one that I read before my surgery, so I want to make sure I'm giving the full picture. This book presents the obsession that society has with the purity of women in a unique and compelling way. 16-year-old Dika fails the purity ritual when her blood is shown to be gold instead of red. The priests seize her and try to enforce the death mandate that is required for all girls found to be impure. Despite their best efforts, they fail to kill her. She is eventually rescued by a mysterious woman who places her in an elite squad of warriors tasked with defending the kingdom against monsters called Death Shrieks. While this book was fairly enjoyable, I found that it got repetitive at times. How many times do we really need to be told that any scars the girls possess must be from before they hit puberty and came into the powers associated with gold blood? I also found a lot of the character dialogue, thoughts, motivations, and actions to be either simplistic or illogical. This is something that I find to be a common theme in YA, though, so I try not to judge it too harshly for that reason alone. And basically I still feel exactly the same about it. I gave it 4 stars because it was an incredible social commentary, but wrapped in a really compelling and interesting story. And while, yes, I didn't love the writing particularly, I find that a lot of the times in YA, I don't get on with the writing. And I think it's just part of, I'm not a teenager anymore, and so that style of writing isn't compelling for me personally. Okay, next up we have the book I gave 1 star to, The Brighton Breaking Sea by Chloe Neill. This I read post-surgery and hated it. Let me see what my notes are on this. Okay, I just have to, this is like thoughts I had while reading the book. This is pretty bad. I'm about halfway through and have gotten minimal adventure and a whole lot of doesn't make sense. The writing is incredibly simplistic, and if it wasn't for the ages of the characters and a few things that were said, I would honestly think it was a middle grade book. A lot of the chapters end with gems like this. I'm sure we can find a horse. If the horse, she thought, didn't find them first. And at first I thought, like, maybe I was missing something. Like, maybe it was referencing something earlier in the chapter, so I'd, like, flip back. But, like, it wasn't. It was just, I think, the author's attempt at being funny, and it isn't funny and doesn't make sense. I'm not sure if the author is attempting humor here or what is happening, but it comes across as stupid, and I still fully agree with that. The dialogue is pretty inane, and it's mostly a case of telling and not showing, and I'm not sure any of the characters have a personality, and I stand by that. This book was bad. It was just, I really don't have any redeeming qualities. There's this point where they're in a battle of some sort, and one of the shipmates, like, bites somebody, like one of his own crewmates, and they are like, oh, haha, I guess maybe I need to give him more responsibility because he's just got a lot of energy. Like, what? It doesn't make sense. Like, what? I don't know. It was just weird. And what I was hoping was that this was going to be this great, like, piratey adventure. And I know she's not a pirate, right? But it is on a ship. She is... What is she? It's just like the Royal Navy, essentially. And she's like a young female captain, and look, there was just a lot that didn't make sense about this book, and I didn't like it. We're almost done here. I have Final Girls by Riley Sager. I gave this 3 stars. This was I've read all of Riley Sager's other books, but for whatever reason I never got to his initial book. And I enjoyed it. It was good, especially for a debut, and I don't really have much to say about it because it's a thriller, and I don't know. I don't want to say too much and give things away. The next book, I actually started this book in February, but it was very, very long. The Dead Are Arising, The Life of Malcolm X by Les Payne. I gave this book 4 stars. I took a lot of notes on this book because I was initially thinking I was going to do a standalone review, but then I didn't get it finished in the time frame that I wanted to. What I am going to do, though, is I'm going to link like an Own Voices reviewer because I thought his thoughts on the book were excellent. This was like equal parts fascinating and boring. So the early life of Malcolm X I found to be so interesting, and the way it was written was pretty compelling. The author did a lot of research and kind of that sounds bad, corrected things in the Malcolm X autobiography. And the corrections were made based on other people's recollections and like actual like data from like stuff that's dated. Which, I mean, when you're writing your own story, like, memory is very fallible. And in addition to that, he didn't want to name names, so we have characters in the autobiography that are actually like composites of several characters that existed in Malcolm's real life. So he cleared up a lot of those things, and that was really interesting. But then when we got to the point where he had joined the Nation of Islam, oh my god, I was bored. Like, I got so, and I know part of it's probably because religion is not my thing, but to me it was like so obvious that it was a corrupt pseudo-religion, and I just, I didn't like it. However, once we got to the part where he left the Nation of Islam, I found his work to provide justice for African Americans to be so compelling. I didn't know a lot of the stuff he did. I didn't know how well traveled he was. I didn't know how he was trying to get African countries, at least one of them, to like file suit with the UN for human rights violations for the racism that was so pervasive in the United States. And I found it just so compelling. Like, he's a fascinating man. One of the main problem I had with the book, though, was the author, Les Payne, well, and his daughter kind of finished it after he died. They never really mentioned Malcolm's wife. Like, we get one line in the middle of a random chapter that mentions that he had gotten married and they have like 4 kids at this point. And I was like, that's it? So like, but what I don't know is, was his wife really such just a footnote in his life that she didn't rate any higher than that little bit that we got of her? Or was it just the author not putting it in for one reason or another? I don't know, but I would have loved to know more about her and how they got together. And then the other thing that I thought was an interesting choice is this book is not necessarily told chronologically. Like, on the broad scale it is. Like, you'll have different, part 1 will be from between this year and whatever else. But when we get to the part where there's like a chapter that talks about his meeting with the KKK and goes into, you know, stuff that happened before and stuff that happened after, and then you go to the next chapter and you're actually somewhere in the middle of all that chaos. So there were times that I really struggled to figure out where in the timeline we were. But overall, I think it was a very compelling and fascinating read, and I think that Malcolm X is someone who deserves the fame, the infamy that he has. And I think he was a great counter to Martin Luther King Jr. I think that without both of them working at the same time, I'm not sure that the civil rights movement would have been as effective as it was, because what Malcolm brought to the table was he brought empowerment. He made black people feel worthwhile again. He taught them that they were not servants, they were humans, and they had worth. And I think that's incredibly important, and I feel like without that change in attitude towards how black people were viewing themselves, I don't know if we would have seen the strides that we did in the 60s. The next book I read is The Once and Future Witches by Alix E. Harrow. I gave this 3 stars. I enjoyed it, kind of. So I was about 20%, and I was thinking I was going to DNF it because it was very long, and I was just kind of confused about some things, and I wasn't sure I was enjoying it. But then in my comments, I think it was Bethany? Anyway, she said that she had taken a break around the 25% mark because of similar reasons, and then ended up going back to it and just falling in love with it. And so I was like, okay, cool, I'm gonna give it another try. I can pinpoint what I didn't like about it. I was very confused about the timeline just in general. So first off, this was sold to me as women who joined like the suffragist movement and realize that, you know, witches haven't totally disappeared like they supposedly did in Salem or whatever. And it's very much not that. There's a tiny bit in like the first 3 chapters about the suffragette movement, and that's it. Like, then we're just on to these women forming, I'm not going to call them covens, but kind of, where they're like societies for witches. And so that was kind of disappointing. And then on top of that, the words and the actions and things didn't feel genuine to the late 1800s. Like, a lot of the stuff that was said, the descriptions, they felt very modern to me. And I don't understand why that choice was made. So I didn't care for that. And then there was, well, no, that's going to be a spoiler. You know what? We're just going to leave it there. Did I enjoy it overall? Yes, I did. Is it a new favorite? No. Next we have Why Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism by Kristin Ghodsee. I gave this 5 stars. It was phenomenal. I did a live show with Amrita from Amrita by the Book and Rosie from Rosie Kaksha, and I will link that so you can go get our full thoughts, because there's kind of a lot to unpack here. Now, this is a very clickbait type of a title. But, like, I mean, that's how you sell things. I get that. This book is a lot more than that. I've seen some criticisms that, like, they don't think the author really made a point, but I don't think she was really trying to make a point. I think she was just trying to get people to be a little more open-minded and broaden their knowledge about the topic. It basically discusses socialism in the context of, like, the Soviet Union, and how, yes, ultimately it failed, and she doesn't ignore the human rights violations and, you know, the scarcity problem, but she talks about the things they got right and how they overwhelmingly benefited women. And it was so impactful. Like, reading these things and seeing how these changes could make life better, and then understanding some of my past behaviors based on the fact that I live in a capitalist society and how I view relationships and sex and women's role and things of that nature. And I just really loved it. So if you're at all curious about the book, anything I just said, please go watch that live. It's a little on the long side, but I mean, I think it's interesting, but I'm a little biased. The final book I read was Don't Look for Me by Wendy Walker. I read Emma in the Night by Wendy Walker years ago and really, really loved it. So I wanted to pick this up when I saw it was releasing. This is another thriller, and it was okay. I didn't find it terribly thrilling. I think it really depends on what you're looking for. The story is a little bit quieter and not so edge of your seat intensity. But I think it's done a little bit differently in terms of character motivations and what people are struggling with. Essentially, you have this woman and her car like runs out of gas, and she's trying, like, there's a storm coming in, and she's trying to get to the nearest town to get help, and she gets picked up by this man in this truck. And as she was walking, though, she was kind of looking at her life and all the failures and struggling with, you know, like, her own guilt over a certain thing that happened and how her family reacted, and the fact that she doesn't feel loved, and she feels like it's her own fault and she should just leave. So she was thinking, like, I'm just gonna walk away and keep walking and never come back. So she gets picked up by this man, and she, like, reassesses her situation, and it's like, you know what, no, I want to be with my family. I don't want to walk away from them because I still love them despite everything that's going on. And then the man kidnaps her, And then we're also following a perspective that is her daughter's point of view. She's about 21 years old and she is looking for her mother. The police and her father are convinced that her mom walked away from them based on some evidence that was found, and she is not convinced that that's the case. And so that's kind of what we're doing. We're following her and her internal struggles, and then her search for her mom, and then we're also following her mom in her captivity. And it was good. I enjoyed my time with it, but it wasn't, from a thriller perspective, from what I like in a thriller, it wasn't like top-notch for me. So those are my thoughts on the books that I read in March. I am very happy to be back filming some new content for everybody. Please let me know all your thoughts in the comments about the books that I read. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you're new here and you liked this video, hit that subscribe button. I'd love to see you chilling in my comments sometime. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you soon. Bye.